Hello, my name is Jongnic Bontemps. I am the composer for Transformers Rise of the Beast, and I am here talking it up with Jeff on Traversing the Stars.
Hello, Junie. Thanks so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
Hey, happy to be here. I'm super excited to talk with you. So, yeah, let's get it.
I always start fantastic. I always start with a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for music, and who are your earliest influences?
Well, I have to say, it was my mother who forced me into a life of music. She wanted to hear the sound of the organ in the house. So she bought an organ and she had me, and at 4 years old, put me in front of that thing and said, start playing. Wasn't my first love. What became my first love, though, was when they bought a piano a few years later, and I was able to pour out all of my grade school and middle school drama and angst
Yeah.
into that instrument. I just started taking lessons. I started making up music, and it really just became part of who I was. And I did music all throughout middle school, high school, played in bands, sang in the choirs, accompanied singers. And then in college, I actually studied music. So it ended up being quite a journey for me.
Where did she get an organ from? That sounds like such an odd instrument to find lying around. Like, where'd you go looking for an organ?
I don't know. My mom found the organ. She ended up buying one because she heard her mother. Her mother used to play the organ throughout
Yeah.
the house when she was growing up. So he just wanted to hear the sound, I guess, of a church organ. It wasn't even like a cool one, like a Hammond B3 organ. No, it was like a, I don't even know, I don't remember the actual name of the brand or anything like that, but it definitely was not super cool. But still, it made her happy. But it just didn't make me happy. So I ended up moving on from that instrument.
Well, obviously, you stated music because once again, you're a fantastic composer. So, did you find that you just had a regular affinity for music? Is something that you just learned through the experience of being forced to learn the organ?
You know what? I found that I really enjoyed making music. And, I knew I was never going to be a great musician, right? Because I had so many great teachers and their ability to play that instrument transcended anything that I felt was possible for myself. So I was like, it was never going to be uh, that path. And I didn't even know about composing music for film and TV until much later in life. So
Mm.
I was just going to do music, play my little jazz stuff, play in church a little bit, and just write my little songs that like nobody else would hear besides, my family. And it would just be, for me. And it was never
Mm.
meant to be any part of a career or anything like that. It wasn't until much later in life, once I had had a career in software, that I found film composing. Well, actually, it kind of found me because I was in software and I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. So a friend of mine listened to a little piece of music that I had written on this program called GarageBand that I had found randomly. And they said to me, that sounds like film music. And I was like, wait, there's music in film? There's music in video games? That's a job? Hold on a second. I think I want that job. I can do that job. And that launched an entire discovery process of how to make that transition from being a Silicon Valley software executive to being a film composer. And I have to say, the dust has settled 12 years later, and here I am.
Where does the balls for that come from? Because once again, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure Silicon Valley is not an easy gig to get either. But
Right?
composing for music, I mean, how many are there necessarily are successful out there? Where did you think to yourself, I'm going to
Dude,
do that?
hubris. The hubris at the time on my part, I mean, just the cojones grande, you're right, that I must have had. But it really was mostly just ignorance, right? Because it's like, I want to do that. I can do that. And you're right. I had had a successful career in software in Silicon Valley, and I actually had no formal computer programming training. I didn't go to school for computer programming. I went to school for music. So I was able to pick up computer programming. I learned, several languages. I was then running teams, and by the time I was at HP thinking about leaving, I was running four teams of software development
Mm.
developers across the world, right? And I was in charge of a multi-million-dollar product line. So I'd had this track record of I can do anything, right? Which I guess was that blind hubris basically allowed me to take this leap of faith. And boy, was it a leap of faith. And boy,
Mm.
was I wrong because I ended up leaving, Silicon Valley with a very, lucrative job and took my whole family down to LA and we started over. And, while we were never on the street and while we were never hungry, there were many days where the bank account was negative. There were many days when I didn't know how we were going to make ends meet, but we made it work, right? And quite honestly, it was a very tough road with a lot of
Mm.
disappointments. But it was one of those things that I truly believed that this is what I wanted to be great at. I truly believed this is what I was going to put the time and effort into and what I was going to dedicate my life to. So as long as I was making music, even though I was making any money for it or I was doing it for favors for people or whatever, as long as I was doing it, I was happy. And I was able to find other things that were connected to music to keep the lights on. I
Mm.
actually created a tech company that focused on doing tech development for composers.
Mm.
So I would go into their studios and redesign their entire studio with the latest and greatest technology. I taught at both USC and Occidental. So after I graduated the USC program in film scoring, I came back as a professor in the same program that I, got into. So I did that for a while. Taught at Occidental College. I did orchestration jobs for people. I did copying jobs for people. I did whatever I had to do to basically keep the lights on, and at the same time continue to work on the short films,
Mm.
the web series. Eventually the independent features, right? For little to no money because I enjoyed it.
Mm.
And I felt that I was growing a career. And eventually, the people that I worked with, they grew in their career. And they were then able to give me opportunities because I had worked with them for so long and we had had a great relationship, great shorthand. And I guess they kind of liked what I did. So they kept hiring me. And eventually, I got me into various rooms.
So was there like a time limit you were going to give yourself to be successful? Like, in other words, let's say 2 years went by and nothing happened, 4 years, 5 years. Was there a time frame that you thought to yourself, if I don't do it by now, this is, I'm going to walk away? How soon, how early before you got to that level, did you already get successful?
No, no. So a friend of mine gave me this book called the 10X Rule. And the concept behind the 10X Rule, if I get it correct, is it's going to take you 10 times longer and 10 times harder to do something than you think it is going to be, right? So you got to prepare yourself for that. So I actually gave myself 10 years. I was like, you know what? It's a 10,000 hours idea. I need to give myself 10 years to invest in this. And then after 10 years, I can ask the question, should I look at doing something different? Right. So I came in with that mindset. And that's the same mindset I give anybody who's coming into, this career. You got to give yourself 10 years to be hungry, to grind, to work hard, because that's what it's going to take. Now, some people pop earlier than that. Some people pop later than that. But, for me, it's kind of like I see a big shift in people's careers and whether or not they're here or not in LA doing this thing after about 10 years.
Mm.
So I wanted to focus on that, and I gave myself 10 years. And quite honestly, I graduated from USC in 2012 because I ended up going back to school to do film scoring at the master's level. I graduated in 2012, and here we are 11 years later, and I just finished scoring Transformers: Rise of the Beast.
That's absolutely awesome. And just ask one more question. You said you took your family, to Florida. How much time did they give you? I know
Oh, right.
wives are different than yourself.
You know what? I have to say, so yes, I was in Silicon Valley. I had a wife and two kids, and they knew sort of like rich dad, right? Because we were doing well.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
I was like, okay, you know what, y'all? We're going to leave everything that we have and all of your friends and your schools and all the stuff and the house and blah, blah, blah. We're going to go to LA and we're going to start over. They're like, huh? But to their credit, my wife was like, okay, because she saw how happy and passionate I was, about this career and
Mm.
about what I knew I had to give to the world. And, the kids, well, they had no choice. So they just had to grow with us anyway. And as long as, they had food and clothes and school, they couldn't call, child services on us. So they had no choice. But, honestly, again, because we had what we needed every step of the day, every step, and every day, there was really no time limit on her side either. And,
Mm,
we saw the progression. We saw the short films turning into independent features turning into, studio features or TV shows or video games. So we saw this progression. And we also, quite honestly, built a wonderful life of people around us. So many of the filmmakers that I worked with, or the musicians that I worked with, or the other sort of supporting music people, they became part of our family. So
mm,
now we became part of a community, and the community started thriving. We also had a wonderful church community. So we basically created community for us. So this way it just felt like home,
mm.
and we were on the road. Now, I will tell you this, for Transformers Rise of the Beast, we did have to make a big decision. Because when I was asked to submit music to the studio, because they're like, hey, even though I worked with the director before and he put my name on the list, that was not going to be enough. I had to give the studio the sound that they wanted. So my agent and I said we needed to write an amazing demo, which meant that we had to record it in LA with music. I had to write the music first and foremost. Then we had to record it in LA. Then we had to have it videotaped, professionally edited, voiceover, and create basically a sizzle reel about me and my passion for Transformers and the music that I would bring to the franchise and present that to the studio. And of course, it was going to cost about $20,000.
Oh shit.
So yeah, it was not cheap. You think music is cheap? Music is not cheap. So it was going to cost about $20,000 to put this whole package together for to get an interview, right? It wasn't even as if like, oh, we're going to hire you. Let's do what you. No, this was to have a meeting. So I spoke to my wife. I said, honey, I know we've been saving some money away for a house. We got to dip into that money. And she asked me like 5 questions about different ways of like trying to think about how we can do it different. I said, I don't think so. He said, okay, let's do it. So we did it. And let me tell you, it took about 9 months for me to get hired.
Longest 9 months of your
After,
life, I bet.
exactly. Oh yeah. But in the end, we got hired, in that investment and that faith, that my wife put in me, paid off.
Now, I mean, obviously, Transformers is a massive franchise. You
Hmm.
unless you're living in a cave, you know Transformers. Now, and obviously, as a composer, being putting your name on something of that size is hugely helpful to your career. Beyond that, how familiar were you with the franchise, and how much were you a fan of it?
Okay, so stop right there. I grew up with Transformers. All right. So I was watching the animated series as a kid. I had the toys. I had Optimus Prime. I had Megatron. I had Starscream. I wish I still had the original toys to be worth something maybe at some point. But
Yes.
when you're like 8 years old or whatever, you're not thinking about that. You're throwing them all down the street with your friends. But I had the toys. I watched the cartoon, the animated. I watched the animated movie, the '86 movie. Watched that when the Bay movies came out, watched all of those in the theater. So I loved Transformers. I grew up with Transformers. I pretended like I was Optimus Prime on the playground, right? That's the OG. So I was very familiar with the franchise when I heard that my good friend Stephen Cable Jr. was going to be the director of this next installment. So when I put that demo together, I really just listened to that little kid in me. Like, what would I want to hear, right? The music to be
Mm.
when I'm playing with Optimus Prime. And took that, took the understanding of the world and took the understanding of what the new installment was going to be and wrote a demo and put that all into that music that I just told you that
Mm.
we sent to the studio. And honestly, that theme that we wrote in that demo is actually the new theme for the Autobot that's in the movie right now.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. So I'm gonna put you on the spot. This is the big question in the world of Transformers. How do we feel about the '86 movie?
Oh, the '86. I love the '86 movie. I
Okay.
love, you know what? Okay, so there's one thing about the '86 movie I didn't necessarily understand. It's like why they had to kill Optimus Prime. Like it was almost inevitable that they were going to have to kill Optimus Prime because that was like the big thing, right? They wanted to shift it. But I was one of the people that was like, no, you can't do that. And who's this Rodimus Prime punk? This Rodimus Prime is no Optimus Prime. He's a freaking punk. We got to get rid of this guy. And I'm so glad that, they brought Optimus back later on because man, that was a blow. But the music was awesome. Vince DiCola. It was awesome. As a matter of fact, it's already been out there. I actually integrated the original theme for Unicron that you hear
Oh,
when Unicron comes into the frame on the '86 movie. You're going to hear that same theme when we introduce Unicron in Rise of the Beast as a little throwback to fans.
nice.
We also integrated some of the music from the Bay movies. Some of those themes you're going to hear in the movie as well. So we wanted to make sure that you were going to get bits and pieces of the Transformers world and pay homage and bring
Hmm.
that into this world, as well as build something new.
I will say I'm actually a Rodimus Prime fan, so I'm going to defend him. So I'm
I
going to
mean,
stand my
look, a
ground on
hot
that
rod
one.
truck. Okay, fine. You mean a hot rod truck? I don't get it, but okay.
I will say I like that they gave him like a kind of like a range of personality a little bit more because I think he was more flawed.
Mm,
I think like, as someone like as a kid growing up to myself, I can see myself as Rodimus. I could not see myself as Optimus. Just a little too confident for me.
I get that. Well, remember we talked about this. I had that hubris
Right.
going on, so maybe it was maybe that confidence came from Optimus Prime as a kid, because it was always the nobility, right? The
Mm,
honor, the self-sacrifice,
mm,
right? Looking for the greater good. Those were all the characteristics that I tried to see in myself. And you're right, it's a really tough level or bar, to raise yourself to. But I always really aspired to do that. But I will tell you this, in Rise of the Beast, the Prime that we know and love goes on a journey.
mm.
And this is before, the prime of the Bayverse movies. So Prime's got a bit of a journey to go on to be that person, to be that character that we just talked about with the honor and nobility and loving humans and all that kind of stuff. He ain't there yet in this movie.
Well, for the fans who don't know, is that if they know or not know, obviously this is Rise of the Beast. This is characters from Beast Wars that came out,
Hmm.
I think in the '90s. But that's something else were you familiar with those characters as well? And
You know what? I was not. I kind of honestly, I was not because by the time it was the '90s, I was in college, so I wasn't really watching Beast Wars at that point. So I know that there are a lot of people who grew up in the '90s, and this is their Transformers, right? This is their sort of lore, their world. So I had to do a little bit of research on who the Maximals were and the Terracons and the Predacons and all of that to get a sense of what that world was like.
hmm.
And yes, we do bring in those characters, the Maximals, the Terracons, the Predacons. They all come into our world here. So, there had to be a learning curve for that.
Now, for once again, anyone who doesn't know who listeners, obviously there's Autobots and there's Maximals. Both are obviously heroic characters. So, from a musical standpoint, how do you differentiate hero Autobots versus hero Maximals?
Oh, interesting. So I would say the Autobots, their theme, I would say, is more sort of noble. It's a little moody because it's a tough journey, right, of trying to get back to Cybertron and trying to,
Hmm.
free their planet. But I would say it's very sort of like aspirational and it's
Hmm.
inspiring. The words that I would put on that. Schools are large and they are already sort of like noble, right? They've been around for a long time and they have evolved and they are solid and grounded, right? And but they can also be fierce, right? And badass. So those are the kind of the things that I was trying to put into the Maximals music. They're also chosen to sort of be a little bit more quote unquote primitive, for lack of a better word, right? They're in a more verdant environment.
Hmm.
They decide to be animals, right? Is what they transform into. So I wanted the music to feel just a little bit more sort of tribal and have a little bit more sort of percussion, in that music as well. So I think those are the big differences you're going to find, between the two themes. And the nice thing is that I was actually able to, in many of the cues, weave the themes together. So you'll
Nice.
hear the Autobots theme, and you hear the Maximal theme. Then we have another theme that we created called like the Key theme, which is about one of the I don't know way too much stuff, but we have like the quest, so to speak. There's a theme around that, essential with Elena, one of the characters. So there's music that's associated to that quest. with Elena. So, I try to pull all three of those themes when appropriate together, into the music. And hopefully you'll be able to hear those ideas being interwoven because they're all kind of mixed up together.
Now, I mean, obviously Transformers. Like I said, this is the fifth one, not counting. Well,
Oh,
there's Bumblebee, Bumblebee as
it's
well.
the
It's kind
seventh.
of
It's
seven.
well, it's the seventh if you include Bumblebee.
Okay,
It's the sixth if you don't include Bumblebee.
gotcha. Okay, so I was off on my count. So I mean, obviously this is a franchise. Obviously, there's potential for future ones. Now, when
Hmm.
you're without, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned as well, yeah, with your hubris. I mean, obviously, that's in your head, this is a franchise, there's a potential for sequels. As you're building
Hmm.
your themes and your music themes for these characters, are you keeping in mind potential opening to build upon in future movies?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I'm hoping that with the music of this movie, we're laying the foundation for, the next series of movies. There's been no sort of concrete plans as far as what those are, so I'm not spoiling it because we don't really know. But but there are thoughts and ideas of what they would be, right? There's potential of what those could be. But I'm hoping that, we are building basically the themes and the sounds that we can then build as a foundation for the scores for the next movies, right? So we will see. Time will tell. But these characters, they have amazing arcs, right? And journeys. And I'm hoping that we can take this music on those journeys with them as well.
So, is this film? I was going to put you on the spot just a little bit. Is this film designed? I mean, did anyone discuss sort of a franchise arc? Like, this is going to be the first of this many of some movies, so this is where we're headed. So, do we know this is part of something that's already been planned out with other films?
Well, let's just say this. Make sure you stay around for the post-credit
Okay,
sequence.
very cool.
Okay? Just make sure you stay away from the post-credit sequence. And the ending of this movie is going to set you up for some possibilities for the future.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so the other thing that Transformers is synonymous with, at least the Bay Transformers synonymous with, is they're very loud, very bombastic, a
Hmm.
lot of audio, special effects, and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
So when you're thinking about putting in the music, you have all these sound effects attached with fights, and they're very loud. So I mean, as a musician, as a composer, is your goal to try to weave it in, or are you trying to go over that sound with your music? How do you balance the two?
Well, honestly, a lot of it, that balancing happens when they actually take the sound effects, take the music, take the dialogue, and they mix it all together so masterfully, what we call the dub stage. And, we had an Oscar-winning dubbing mixer, Ron Bartlett, who did like Dune, is our dubbing mixer. So he masterfully crafted all of these things. And there have to be decisions that are made. So when I'm composing the music, I'm thinking about trying to make the music as full and lush, right, as possible. I'm also thinking about trying to sound design because these are electronic technological beings, right,
Hmm.
metallic beings. So I'm trying to bring in sound design into the music that is musical, that has pitch, that has rhythm, but sounds like it belongs in a Transformers world, right?
Hmm.
So I was crafting music to not only encompass the organic instruments and the orchestra and synths, but also the sense of sound design. And we spent a
Hmm.
lot of time doing recordings all over town and then taking those recordings and processing them in a way that I could then incorporate into the music. Now, that was all wonderful and sounds great, and you'll be able to hear all that stuff on the album, right? Because the album will also be released with the movie on June 9th. So you'll be able to listen to that on all streamers. But by the time you then take that music and you layer in the sound effects and you layer in the dialogue, changes have to be made. They
Hmm.
might have to lose one of my, sound effecty sounds because it clashes with what's happening on screen. Or maybe it sounds so real that they make it feel like the robot's doing something or one of the characters is doing something that they're not doing, right?
Hmm.
So there was a lot of these decisions about, okay, now we're pulling it all together, we might need to lose this sound over here or move it over here or this or that, right? or we might need to thin the music a little bit because we want this to be a sound effect moment. Or, we need to drop the music entirely in this section because we really want the sound effects to take over.
Mm.
Or we're going to bring the sound effects down so we want the music to take over. So it's really about what serves the story best at a given moment in time. But my job as the composer is to kind of give the director, the dubbing mixer, music that is full and layered as a toolkit
Mm.
that they can then, even though I wrote the music to scenes, like I had scenes, I wrote the music, the way I thought it should work for the scene. But when they pull it all together, they make different decisions about what works best for the scene. And sometimes that means dropping the music. Sometimes that means thinning the music. Sometimes that means rearranging it, right? And then also on top of that, when I'm composing, I'm usually looking at temporary special effects.
Mm.
Sometimes even looking at cards, Optimus Prime enters here, right? So I'm looking at that. Now, when the final effects come in, maybe they're a little longer, maybe they're a little shorter, right? Maybe is now a motion that I wasn't taking into consideration. So again, they now have to modify and
Mm.
massage the music to make it work with all of that. So it really is so many moving parts that we just have to be flexible and give the director, the dubbing mixer, the sound effects team a toolkit that they can then sort of you know craft to serve the picture.
Now, when they're making those decisions, are they consulting with you? Because obviously,
I wish no.
because I was gonna say, because I mean, because are there times where there's a certain theme or continuity in a score that would need to be cut or rearranged, and you're like, oh, damn it, I needed that because it's building upon this, that, or the other thing.
You are right, and this is why you have. So let me back up a little bit. This is very common in all of these movies. This is not specific to a Transformers movie. This happens in all, big action movies. Things get sort of moved around in this way. So this is not unique to me. This is why you need to have what's an amazing music editor. Music editors are the people who are going to edit the music, right, to work with the picture.
Mm.
Because we're also getting picture changes. And if I need to go there and rewrite the music every single time there's a picture change, I would never make it. So you have music editors that will then take, the music and make it work the picture. And you hope
Mm.
that you are partnering with a music editor that understands music and understands not only what's happening right now in music, so we don't cut off a phrase or we allow the theme to sort of ring out, right, in the way it's supposed to. But also, as you said, how does it build upon later in the movie, right?
Mm.
So they have those ideas, and you have to trust them because when they're making having these conversations, doing this stuff, it's kind of awkward to have the composer down there in the room and they're saying, "I think we need to drop the music here." So they try not to keep us, and of course, mixing a movie like this is a month-long process. I'm
Mm.
still upstairs writing music for, other parts of the movie while they're starting the mix. So, it's I can't. So you have to rely on your music editing team to be down there and really guard, the sanctity and the integrity of the music and make changes, right, that keep that integrity, but still serve the picture and
Mm.
what we need at that moment in time.
That takes a must take a lot of trust because I can't imagine, just sitting back and going, "Don't cut that piece out," or you hear or you're watching the movie, you're like, "No, they cut my moment."
Yeah, and that happens. And actually, we had a screening of the night, and I watched it. I was like, "Oh, okay, I see what happened there." But you know what? Even though like I'm hyper focused on the music, because obviously, look, we have an hour and 50 worth of music in this movie. The movie is
Mm.
like two hours and 7 minutes. We have an hour 50 of music, so there's a lot of music in this movie that we wrote for this thing. So yeah, and I know every cue, I know every story behind every cue, I know what it was envisioned to be and how what it should have been, and I'm listening to say, okay, this is what it ended up being. But I'll tell you this: I don't think anyone in the audience felt it.
Mm.
People still applauded, they still cheered, they still enjoyed the movie, and they went on the ride. And the fact that my phrase maybe got cut, two beats of my phrase got cut out, no one cares except for me. So again, it just goes to the fact that the music editing team, led by Sam Zines and Catherine Wilson, those two amazing music editors, really supervise the entire music editorial process. Really sort of guarded the integrity of the music because only comments I've gotten back is that the music works
Mm.
and it makes the movie that's what I'm looking for. That it really pulls them into the movie, right?
Mm.
And that they can feel the emotion and it has the heart. So they did a great job of allowing the narrative and the story to still hit the audiences, even though it might not be exactly the way that I wrote it.
Now I'm gonna give a quote that you gave. You
Oh,
said
okay.
film music has to tell a story without words.
Yes.
So when you're thinking about the story, are you getting a full script in order to read it and understand it? Are you starting from the protagonist arc? Are you talking about or you go from a scene in general? Like, if you understand the distinction would be instead of this is Optimus Prime throughout the movie. This is what I got music for him, or just this segment of film. I need to figure out the sort of that scene.
Well, it all depends upon when you're being brought into the film, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're being brought in very early and they haven't shot anything. So all you have is a script, right? And then maybe that point is you decide to write some music that's away from picture because you don't have any picture. And you start writing what we call suites. So maybe I'll write like a 3 or 4 minute piece of music that is like the music for a given character or a
Mm.
place or a situation, right? I then play that for the director or the producer and I say, well, do you hear your movie in this music? Does this move you in a way that you think would work with the film? And they'll say either no or yes, or I like this part, don't like that part, and then we iterate. That's great because you get at that point you're there early, right? And then you can do those kind of things. And then when the picture starts coming in, you've got basically a library of music that you can then start throwing up against picture yourself. And you can start to see, does this work, right, for
Mm.
yourself? And then you make changes, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it works great. In our case, again, the theme that I wrote for the Autobots way before the I was even hired on the movie, that ended up working great. I tried to get rid of it. I tried to do something different. I tried, I was like, not good enough, not good enough. But it just kept coming back, kept working, and it's in the movie, and I'm so happy that it's there. So that can sometimes happen. Um, I would say this: I had one theme for the Maximals early on. I kind of came upon it, and one of the music editors said, "This works great," and I started using and starting building the score around that because by that point I had picture. I kind of knew what the story was. I started placing this theme, in various places at the top of the movie and then getting to whatever, whatever. And then the director, my guy, maybe about a month before we're supposed to record, he's like, you know what? This isn't working. This theme is not working. And he always, and to give his credit, he always, I could tell he was never really in love with it. Like he said, it works here and it works there. It works as an idea. But when with what I have in my mind that you don't see yet, because we haven't done it yet, but what I have in my mind is not going to work for that. So, and lo and behold, when I tried to put it there, it didn't work. And
Mm.
then he's like, it didn't work. I told you. He didn't say I told you so, but I could tell he was thinking it. And he's like, yo, I think you need to start over. And I was like, oh, by this point, I had like maybe 3/4 of the movie written, and the steam was over the movie. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Like I said, I gave up, and I really liked the theme. I was like, this is working for me, but it wasn't working. So after I finished panicking, I got back to work, started thinking about this, and over the weekend, the new theme for the Maximals came to me. And it was away from the piano, away from anything else. I was like, wait, it was it just hit me in my mind. And then a couple days I worked on it for a couple days. And then when I presented it to him to picture, right? He was like, that's it. That's it. And he left my studio humming it. I was like, we're good.
That's a good sign.
we it was a good sign. And it's actually the first single that we released from the album called The Maximals. You'll hear that
Mm.
theme in there. But that was like a Hail Mary last minute coming in. But honestly, I think it's probably one of the catchiest pieces of music I've written for this film. If not probably the catchiest piece of music I've written for this film.
I did get to hear the match. I'm glad you guys released. The only thing I was hoping that the album was released earlier because I was looking for because sometimes I was trying to find the rest of the music. I was like, I can't find the rest of the music.
Well, that's a good sign. You wanted more.
Yes,
You
indeed.
see, that was a good sign that we did something, got your attention. Now you want more. So 2 more days, man. 2 more days.
Yeah,
It'll be out on
I
June
will.
9th. It's coming out.
Yeah, I wanted. I wish I had better like knowledge of musical instruments because there was a sound in the Maximals. I can't remember how deep in it was. Like almost towards the middle. Like I didn't couldn't pick out what the sound was. It was really awesome sounding. Like I can't remember what it was, but cause at least I'm not as musical.
Right. Well,
but it was fantastic.
that boing, or something
Yes,
like that.
yes,
Yes,
that
that's
that's what
exactly
that
what it is.
was. And it was like, it was almost, it wasn't quite halfway, but it was like in that time frame.
Yeah, no,
And
no. It was right after the main statement of the theme, right?
yes,
So the last sort of statement, and it that was one of the things that I was trying to create, a sound, right? So that's not a real instrument. That's a sound that we created uh for the maximal. So we actually try and play that a couple times in the film when a maximal kind of shows up or does something. It's like the maximals like emote music or whatever, right? So we wanted to have a sound that we could place that would basically do that thing on top of the melody. Because sometimes, you can't play a full melody. You don't have enough time.
right,
It's just like a gesture or something happens. So we also wanted to create a sound. And that sound that you heard, that's that sound that we did. But remember, it's also one of those things that it's metallic. It could
yeah.
be thought of as a sound effect sometimes. So we had to be very careful that people didn't mistake it for like a robot sound, but it is a musical kind of gesture.
Okay, I was wondering because I felt like I was listening to something. What instrument is that? I can't figure out. I wanted to talk to you about it, but I couldn't figure out the instrument, and I didn't want to sound stupid. But so it's a made up.
It's a
All
made up
right,
thing. It doesn't
so
exist.
so
Doesn't
that's why I
exist.
couldn't figure it out. I was thinking, actually sat like for
Right.
10 minutes going, trying to figure out like what instrument made that sound. That's awesome.
So yeah, it's the maximal instrument. That's it.
That's cool. So I mean, obviously you got Transformers coming out on January 9th. Sorry, June 9th.
Oh no, not January 9th.
June
We'll be very
9th.
upset.
Yes. Obviously we had a sequel coming. I'm just assume that it's happening. What's
Dude,
next?
you didn't hear that from me.
So
You
what's
didn't hear
next
that
for
from
you?
me. So what's next for me is I'll be working on a couple of small things, not small things, a couple of big things that I can't really talk about. But I will say this, I also worked on a video game called Redfall, which was for Xbox, which just came out. We're talking about potentially doing some more music for that platform. Because obviously there's going to be DLCs and new missions and all that stuff. So, I'll be working on that as well and expanding in that world. But I also, for this month, I'll be doing a lot of traveling. I have three projects opening in New York, two for Tribeca, uh, two documentaries at Tribeca. I've got a Disney Plus hip hop musical that I scored with Rashid Kulkarni called World's Best. That's also having a screening in New York. Then I also have an erotic thriller for Hulu called Jagged Mind that will be coming out on Hulu. I believe it's going to be June 16th. So it's been a very busy couple of years, with six projects all basically hitting in the next 8 week span. So I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna sleep for a little bit, right? I'm gonna recharge, and I'm gonna work on a few small things here and there, mostly proof of concept stuff for some other projects that we're trying to get off the ground. But and then also look at some more music for Redfall.
Very cool. Like I said, when you're ready to talk about some more projects, always welcome back on the show. You've been awesome, sir.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed my time with traversing with the stars. But does that mean actually I'm a star?
Yes, indeed. That's you got my pun. You're my star.
There we go. There we go. See, the hubris paid off. The
Yes.
ignorance paid off. The ignorance paid off.
I said thank you, sir. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Thank you so much.